I was essentially building marketing up as a function. I was like, well, how are we going to measure what we're doing? By the end of that 6-month stint, we saw that our awareness had raised, it was 10% in the first 6 months, where it was really hard because we didn't have any direct competitors because we were in a category that never existed before with a product that had never existed before.
I sometimes will use Zoom calls, like recorded Zoom calls for political reasons. Like
there might be all this rich data that you're sitting on, but if you're not communicating it in a way that the people you need to convince actually want to hear it, then it's just going to fall on deaf ears.
Cinemas do it, movies do it. 90% of the advertising happens before it comes out. We can all understand that.
I didn't realise it was so above the industry average. Like they said brands weren't doing that in 6 years and we did it in 9 months. And it was great because I remember putting the big report together after the campaign and I was like rolling in there with my 12% increase and I was like, oh, boys aren't going to believe this. We were saying it's a black currant drink, it's good for your brain. Then we were looking at the research coming through and they were like, oh, it's a cherry drink, it's for your lungs. And we're like, right.
Hello, Chanel. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for coming along to chat to me.
No, of course. Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about something that most marketers have been through today, proving the effectiveness of marketing to senior management. Where's my money going? What am I getting for it? I don't want to pay for awareness. What is awareness? All the things we've heard. But you've got a really interesting story that I wanted to jump into because you've done that. You've been able to prove awareness to senior management, and you were able to grow awareness, measured awareness, substantially. Can you share what happened with us?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy, that's for sure. Like this experience that I'm going to talk to was definitely because we were using the right tools in order to do it. You know, pre this moment in time, I had never been able to measure awareness. It was just sort of that finger in the air moment of, oh, we spent the money and then we saw the increase, so sure, I'll claim it. But this particular moment, I was in a head of marketing role at Arepa, which is an FMCG company. In that role, my whole, I suppose, the responsibility of what I had was like everything marketing. It was setting up the function of marketing and then actually going and doing the things. And one of the first things that I said when I came into that role was, because I was essentially building marketing up as a function, I was like, well, how are we going to measure what we're doing? That was for me personally, because I was like, if I'm doing this, I want to be able to measure the impact, but also just generally for the business, because they'd never done marketing before properly. I was like, well, let's figure out what our baseline is first, because that's the easiest place to start. Not a lot of marketers get to come into a company and almost have a clean slate. I was like, if we've got a clean slate, I'm going to rinse this for all that this is worth, because it will never be clean again. So one of my big priorities was really looking at what are we using to track everything we're doing. And, you know, I had heard of this tool called Tracksuit. A few of the boys in the business were actually friends with the team that had built the tool.
Because it's a New Zealand company, right?
Yes, it was a New Zealand company. And I mean, in New Zealand, everyone's basically neighbours, cousins or best friends. So I was like, surely you know someone who knows someone. So I heard of Tracksuit and I was like, right, this sounds like a really good idea. They had just launched, so they were looking for people to start using their product to validate how it was going to work. So we got in early. We were one of the first people to test it. Implementing that, I think even just seeing what that tool did. So for those who don't know Tracksuit, it is literally a tool to track brand awareness. You get to sign up to the platform. You get to put your brand in. You get to pick the competitors of your brand as well. For us with Arepa, it was really hard because we didn't have any direct competitors because we were in a category that never existed before with a product that had never existed before. So our data was always going to be a little bit skewed because we were looking at perceived competition like, you know, energy drinks or supplements, etc. like that. But it was really handy to be able to do that because then those were essentially the brands that we were going to track against the kind of work that we were doing. Yeah, you got to set up your competitors, then you got to essentially analyze like what you wanted to be known for, and basically how it worked is that they would then go out and survey a bunch of people through different research tools who had nominated themselves and ask questions that weren't necessarily prompting around your brand. Like it might say, in the health and wellness category, have you purchased any of these products before? And then they'd select yes, and they said, and of those products that you purchased, how many times, or, you know, how would you describe the product? And that was really cool to finally see a piece of work being done that wasn't necessarily asking the explicit question, but was letting an audience come back to you and say, hey, I know this brand exists, maybe I've purchased it, here's what I think about it. And then in the dashboard, we got to see the sentiment around what people were saying about the product too. And from a marketing point of view, that was amazing because it was essentially from the campaigns that we're doing or the social that we're putting out, what we're saying about that brand, are people taking those same words that we're using in brand copy and using that to explain our product? Or are they understanding something completely different? Like for a while, you know, we were saying it's a blackcurrant drink, it's good for your brain. Then we were looking at the research coming through and they're like, oh, it's a cherry drink, it's for your lungs. And we're like, right, there's what we're going to use that data for, and maybe re-educate everyone on what the product is, because they're not getting it.
It's good for your lungs.
Yeah. I was like, what? I mean, I'm sure there was health benefits for that too, but we literally promoted it as a brain drink, and I'm like, where did the comms break down on that one? Like, go back to the drawing board. But that was the first time in any marketing role where I'd ever actually been able to see, like, from what you're saying to what is being said by your customer, are those things aligning? And the big thing for us from a marketing point of view in terms of the awareness was that program allowed us to essentially plug in when we were doing marketing spend. So for example, one of the first bits of activity I did was a marketing campaign targeting people based in Auckland. I called it the boomer campaign because they were people based in Auckland over 50, and we had never targeted them before. So we essentially went into the dashboard, plotted a line in this graph that you get given that says, like, right, we're spending $80,000 here in August, and then after that moment it essentially allows you to track how your awareness has increased from that campaign. And it was really cool to see. I mean, I was refreshing the dashboard every day, which I tell you not to do.
Of course,
I was like, how's the awareness going? How's the awareness going? But it was really cool to be able to see that, you know, from the moment that campaign started, and then we ended up like putting more money into like secondary and third campaigns, by the end of that 6-month stint, we saw that our awareness had raised it was 10% in the first 6 months, the awareness had raised, and then by 9 months it had raised 12%.
Yeah, which
and
is heaps.
It is like, well,
that's so much.
Yeah, I mean, as I told you earlier, I literally got a call from Tracksuit like the day after the reporting came through, and they're like, hey, we think your dashboard's broken. And I was like, oh my God, what's happened? And they're like, oh, it says that you've done 12% increase in awareness in less than 9 months. And I was like, oh, is like that not normal? Like, because I knew how much we were doing, so I'm like, oh, I bloody hope it's 12%. Like, that would be amazing. But I didn't realize it was so above the industry average. Like, they said brands weren't doing that in 6 years, and we did it in 9 months. So then we kind of became this like case study for them of like, if you do everything all at once and track it, like, this is the kind of awareness that you can achieve. And it was so cool to be able to see that, because as a marketer, I had never been able to put that almost like validity on the work that I had done or executed on. It was always just, oh, we ran the thing, the sales went up, the website traffic increased. So like, yeah, I guess that was because of the billboard that we did. No,
it's amazing. I think I've never heard of an increase that high. So what did you do? How did you get an increase that high? I don't look at any of the marketing that I did for them as like breaking the systematic wheel of what good marketing looks like. I think a lot of it was because we were in a category that never existed before, with a product that never existed before. A lot of it was just defining, what does general always on marketing look like for us? Obviously, we had moments within that 9-month time frame that were like key campaign moments. Like I said, with the Boomer campaign, we had a rebrand in there as well. And it was really just looking at, what does marketing look like for the business? What are we going to execute on? And then in my opinion, how do we do that well to make sure that we're reaching everyone? So I think the big thing that we did there was we did everything all at once. We were on billboards, radio, bus backs, we had events running, we had social campaigns running, we doubled down on newsletters that we were sending and emails, because in my head, with all of the work that we were doing, I didn't want it to just be on one channel, because our audience was for everyone with a brain, which is the majority of people. I mean, I've met a few that haven't qualified. But because our audience was so large, I was like, right, how do we make sure that, you know, at every stage of your day, you hear from us at least 2 or 3 times? So the dream customer journey basically in my head, and how I set those campaigns up and all of our activity, was if you wake up in the morning, you check your emails like most of us do. Maybe there's an email there from us about the product. And then you're in your car on your way to work listening to the radio. There we are again. You pass the motorway, there's a billboard of us. You go in the office, you check LinkedIn, there's something about us. You go down to your local supermarket to get lunch. Oh my God, we've got a promo going on. So it was like, how do we just savagely, like, we literally, you could not ignore us. Like, people were messaging me and be like, look, great marketing, but I'm so sick of you. Like, they were like, I like cannot ignore you. I'm like, good. Have you bought us yet? And it almost became one of those things where
people who had never tried us were just like, oh, for God's sake, like, I'll just give it a go because you are everywhere and I can't ignore it. And I was like, that's literally what we wanted. Like, we saw sales increase at that moment, you know, the amount of, I guess, opportunities what we got given as well during that was really cool. We ended up earning over $1 million of free billboard advertising because our creative was so strong that anytime JC Deco had a spot opened up that they couldn't fill, they were like, hey, Chanel, do you want us to chuck you on another billboard? I was like, yes.
He's the Pope Catholic, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not going to say no to free advertising. I mean, like, one of the billboards we got was, I mean, we paid for this one, but then we got to stay on it for like 2 weeks after.
Right.
But it was this huge billboard in the middle of Queen Street, which is based in Auckland. It was kind of like our Times Square moment. Like, if you see the big billboards in Times Square, this was the New Zealand version of that. And I remember the day that thing went live, I Ubered down to where the billboard was, literally stopped traffic to get a photo in the middle of the road with this huge billboard behind me. And I mean, even that then became something that we could talk about. And, you know, we did LinkedIn posts about it, social posts, we got earned media, you know, PR people were covering it for us. All of that was what helped contribute to that increase in brand awareness.
And you were the only person in the team.
Yeah, so I was in that role for, I think, just under 19 months.
Yeah.
For 18 months that I was there, I was the only marketing person. Yeah. You got to be a special kind of person where that amount of work excites you, I promise.
I'm trying to imagine how you actually got all that stuff done.
I think when I left that business, I remember doing like a wrap-up post on LinkedIn about what we'd done, and it actually made me sick when I was like documenting all the things, because it meant that we activated on something almost every single week for the whole time that I was there.
Oh, okay.
But it worked.
Oh, clearly, yeah. I'm not arguing with the effectiveness.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah. I hope it's not. I hope that's not the standard now.
It's my standard.
Well, yeah. I'll be out of a job very soon.
Do not try this at home.
But I guess when we're talking about proving the effectiveness of all this to your superiors at the time, so you would report on brand awareness and preference increase and consideration. All this came through Tracksuit. Is there anything else like you did to prove the effectiveness of what you did to senior management?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the brand awareness was a big thing because we finally had a tool that was tracking it for us. And as you just mentioned, it wasn't just awareness, it was consideration, preference, and usage. So yes, the brand awareness was a huge increase because it meant more people were aware of us. But then we were also seeing increase in how many people were considering buying us, how many people were then choosing us, and then how many people were converting. So while using Tracksuit was part of that, it was also just looking at, you know, how many new people did we get signing up to our newsletter who now wanted to be a part of our ecosystem? How many new Instagram followers did we get? Did we see an increase in people wanting to come to our events, or even like little things like people DMing us asking questions about the product because they'd finally found out about us. They were interested enough, they were invested enough that they wanted to know something before, you know, they went and purchased the product. All of those little things added up, and it was great because I remember, you know, putting the big report together after the campaign, and I was like rolling in there with my 12% increase, and I was like, oh, boys aren't going to believe this. Obviously the brand awareness was the huge play. Like, I remember on the presentation that was like the bold, the 170 size font. I was like, this is what we did. But then it was all the other little things of like how all the Instagram followers increased, the Facebook followers, how many comments we were getting, like all of that also made up the sum of what we achieved for that brand awareness play. And then you have to think, when you run a campaign that big for that long and activate on basically every channel that we could that existed, even just the tailwind of that campaign. So then there was stuff that we were doing after that we weren't paying for, that was all organic, that was still building on the momentum of what we had created. And I mean, that tailwind, you know, the campaign was only for about 3 or 4 months, but the tailwind from that campaign almost lasted another 6 months.
Yeah, right.
Because then all of our social content was getting to more people because they'd found out about us through all that activity we were doing. We were then running events that was providing people with those in-person experiences off the back of the momentum that we'd built from the campaign. So it basically just blew open the water for us of like how much more we could do just off that one big bit of awareness that we got.
And what was the response to the big, bold 12% increase in brand awareness?
I mean, I had a bit of an ego about me after that.
So you should.
I think the response from the business obviously was massively positive. I think it was a huge thing for us as well. Like, there was a little bit of skepticism at the start because it was like, oh, well, we'd never tracked brand awareness before. So, you know, we started at 3%, we grew to 15%. Even starting at 3%, brand awareness as a new product in market, as a category that had never existed before, was still above industry average. So I think a little bit was like, oh, well, you know, we were already doing like pretty well. So it was really around educating on
How much do you want?
Yeah. I was like, come on, guys. God. You want me to make gold next? It was just the education of what does the standard baseline of good brand awareness look like?
Yeah.
How much have we grown and why is that so huge? I remember getting one of the guys from Tracksuit just to kind of like validate, you know, I remember getting like a testimonial from him saying like, this is really good, guys. But yeah, it was just that education piece of like, here's where most brands are at, where we're starting. 6 months later, this is still where everyone's at and we're now up here. And then this is the potential impact of what that unlocks for us. And I think what went so well in my favor is because the momentum from having that amount of awareness we were able to harness and continue to do more activity. It was almost then on a monthly basis I was able to validate, because of that big campaign we did 6 months ago, we're now getting all of these opportunities. And it was insane. It was like the floodgate had opened. Suddenly we were getting partnership requests, sponsorships. Influencers who I was reaching out to maybe 6 months ago who hadn't heard of us were now like, oh shit, yeah, like send me product, I'm down. And I'm like, where were you 6 months ago? But it just unlocked so much for us. And I think the big thing for me was just continuing to communicate every single week. If anyone knows me as a human, like I was like so consistent about it. I was like, hey, we just got this opportunity because they saw us 6 months ago from that campaign, or hey, we got this, by the way, that's tied back to that campaign we did 6 months ago. So just constantly reminding everyone this is where we are now, but it was only because of the work that we did back then.
Yeah. Where were you 10 years ago when I could have really used that information? I'm away like in the corner just doing my work, thinking I'm doing the right thing. You got to tell people. You got to tell people what's going on. I think that those products like Tracksuit are going to be great for marketers like going forward. Like, I mean, there's one called Winter. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
But that's more a B2B one. WYNTER. And it's not tracking brand awareness specifically, but it does. They have panels of professionals and that you can get effectively qualitative feedback pretty cost effectively. Some of their products are only $2,000-$3,000 and you get panel data coming back. So all that type of stuff, hopefully that keeps helping us out more, because I think Tracksuit have also made these measurements accessible to a smaller brand. Like maybe, if you go out to a market research company as a big brand, you can track this stuff, but it wasn't really available to do.
And I think too what Tracksuit has done so well is, you know, like
this isn't a sponsorship for Tracksuit either, by the way. But we both love it. But it can be.
Slide into my DMs. No, I think what Tracksuit had done so well and why they sort of stood out in the market is because even just the way they set up their dashboards, even if you weren't a marketer, you could go into a dashboard and understand the data you were looking at. And for me, I think that was what was so important, because I mean, I've even worked with clients who use other tools for brand tracking and stuff. I feel like I'm looking at like a manual on how to build a rocket ship, like these spreadsheets. It's like all very like inchy kind of data, whereas Tracksuit, it's like there's purple, there's pink, there's green, there's like little emojis everywhere. Like it's just so easy to understand. And I think that was what was so great when I was taking that information to, you know, my managers or the guys reporting to the board. I could literally screenshot straight away some of those dashboards, and it's like anyone could have understood what they were looking at. It was that simple to digest. And I think a lot of brands, with the tools that they come up with, unless you're a marketer, it's really hard to understand what you're looking at. Whereas when, you know, our manager or like one of the CEOs was able to just log in straight away, it was so obvious. And I'm like, you know, unless you were looking at it with your eyes closed, you couldn't have not understood the data you were looking at. Yeah.
And it's like a 2-second. I get it. You don't like, it's just easy to consume. And I get it. I understand. But yeah, like I was thinking about this topic as well, and I sometimes will use Zoom calls, like recorded Zoom calls for political reasons. Like if you're doing a customer interview for it, like recording it, and then you can refer back to, you know, it gives someone something that you can go, oh, well, our customer said that here, you know, 3 minute, 20 second into this video, come back here and have a look at, you know, at what they said. Wasn't me. They said it. I just asked the question. I actually wanted to touch on like brand as well, because I come across, sometimes I'm doing research for these episodes and something interesting comes across. And I heard someone, Dale Harrison, like when people say, you know how there's that skepticism around the value of brand? It's just fluffy, right? You know, what's the value? I was listening to something he said, and he's like, well, movies, how they work is 90% of their advertising is done pre-release. So it's effectively like, what are they doing? What's all that for? So, and I was like, oh, that's a really good analogy, because everyone will be able to go, oh, I get movies. Like I know, like, yes, they do run the ads for, you know, ages before it comes out. People come and consume the product, and they're not really running as much ads when it's out, or they run some to remind you, but a lot of the grunt work's done pre-release. So it's like, oh, that's a great analogy to use with anyone to say, well, cinemas do it, movies do it. 90% of the advertising happens before it comes out. We can all understand that. And having those analogies that anyone can understand, like what Tracksuit does, like that's a tough part, I think, with proving effectiveness to senior management, because I mean, you know, it makes sense to me, right? And I'll do it, and I'll be doing my marketing and doing whatever. But you need to then, explain that in a way that someone else can consume. And it means something to them.
Yeah, and it's a definite skill. I think once you kind of figure out who are the people in the room that I need to convince of this thing, how do I not necessarily meet them where they are? Like for a Reaper, for example, there were like many smart brains, and I was like, right, you guys are up here. I'm just marketing. So I was like, how do we meet in the middle? Like, yes, here is the data that I'm showing you, but what are the buzzwords that I can say where you'll, you know, it's like when you say bacon to a dog, I'm like, right, like what are your guys' buzzwords? And it was obviously like
Sales.
ROI, sales, you know, increase in store, or like ranging and all of that. So it was just learning like, what is the tangible outtakes that they actually want? You know, yes, it's great. Oh, brand awareness, that sounds good. But where does that actually get us? And I was like, more opportunity, more ranging, more stores, more collabs, more sales. And those were really the words that they clung to. And I think that was, I mean, for any marketer, right? Like, it's just so important to know, yes, there might be all this rich data that you're sitting on, but if you're not communicating it in a way that, you know, the people you need to convince actually want to hear it, then it's just going to fall on deaf ears. And I mean, that's what I've had like most of my career. I mean, granted, I didn't have that level of data to report on, but you have to say it in the way that they, you know, they want to listen for them to pay attention.
Yeah. Have you got any other instances you can think of where convincing senior management of marketing effectiveness comes to mind?
I mean, in some previous roles, yes, but it was just very sort of situational based on what we were doing. And I think, you know, Tracksuit with a Reaper just set the bar so high of what like actual tangible good reporting looks like. I think in previous roles I'd been in, it might have been like, oh, you know, our newsletter subscriber rate went up, or our click-through rate on an email went up, and then we saw an increase in sales. That's almost just guesswork at that point, right? Or even when people are like, oh yeah, I heard about you on the radio, it's like, did you though, or did you see the billboard 2 months ago that we did, and then the radio was the thing that converted you? So I think like all of that to me has just been such a grey area, because it doesn't feel like something that's like accurate reporting. It's just, I think that did it.
It's just a loose correlate. This happened and this happened, and let's just join them together.
And it falls under marketing, so I'll claim it.
And I did that, yes. That was all me. Such an important topic. But and I remember Tracksuit, you can kind of model out, like, if our awareness increases by this much, then our consideration can increase, preference, all the way through. What was usage? Like, how were you defining that?
I think the usage for us, like, I think we got about a 4 or 5% increase on that during those 9 months when we saw the 12%. And that was the thing, is like the 12% was the big number, because that was, you know, not common for a brand to jump up that much. But then even like our preference, awareness and usage or consideration, like all of those jumped up almost like 4 or 5% on top of that.
So it's like proportionate.
It was very based on the 12%, you know, the top of funnel stuff. All of the other metrics that were changing were proportionate based on the amount of people that were becoming aware of us. And I think, you know, similar to what I was saying before, that was what unlocked so many more opportunities for us, because it's like, okay, so if now 60% of people are, you know, choosing to potentially try our product, then do we double down on doing tastings or demos, or inviting them to events where our products are? Do we start organising more collabs and getting our product out there? Like, that essentially validated or helped me prioritize so many other sort of organic initiatives that we could do. Because I was like, well, if all these people now know we exist, where are they? How do we get in front of them? How do we just get our product out there? So then they try us once and they're like, oh my God, this was amazing. Now I'll go buy it.
When you say usage, what did that mean?
So usage was like actually like converting to
Buying.
buy. Yeah. When they got given the survey, you know, what products have you bought? Like what brands of these do you know? Have you bought this product? How often do you buy this product?
Okay, so they'd bought it before. Was there a metric for frequency?
Not that we were on, because we were just on like their starter plan, because they'd just launched. I think now there is. Like, I mean, the dashboard, like I was looking at it probably last year and I was like, oh my God, where was this when we started? Because I did some work for them last year and I just saw all the upgrades. I was like, you assholes, like you couldn't have had this ready for us. But I mean, they were still validating that people actually wanted it as a tool.
So cool. No, I think it's I've never heard of an increase like that. So, amazing. Amazing job.
Yeah.
If anyone wanted to find you, where can they go?
LinkedIn. I am all over LinkedIn all the time, 24/7.
Right. Chanel Clark, LinkedIn. Go find her there. And, thank you very much for coming in and discussing your story with us.
No, thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff.
Thanks, Chanel.
Thanks.